Hi, I'm Cllr Rob Waltham, the leader of North Lincolnshire Council, and I'm with...
Alison Barker, and I'm the Chief Executive for North Lincolnshire Council.
So, great. Well, so we're in an in-conversation. We're really keen to, me from a resident perspective, you, Alison, from a council perspective, somebody who's worked in the sector, just to try and pick up some of those issues that people ask, and then also just to discuss some of the challenges, but so people can share some of our views on these things. So I think a good question for me to ask you, and I'm sure you probably will have a question for me as well, but is, so, how long have you been in the sector, and what really drove you to be part of a local council?
So I've been in the sector since 1990.
Right.
So a long time.
Yeah.
And remained working in the sector in a range of different jobs, different councils. But I think the thing that drives me is working alongside communities, residents, and feeling this is a really important job. It makes a difference to people's lives every day, be that a child that is born today in North Lincolnshire to somebody who has lived a life as part of this community and passes away today. So that breadth of understanding the influence and impact you have on people's lives, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I know it is. It's absolutely unbelievable, the impact. People do just think it is often just about, it's about the bins or the roads, but actually 700 plus statutory services that councils have to deliver, and how they then use that influence, because it's not always power, it's often it's influence to get communities to be able to work effectively and obviously to make a change in people's lives where there's no other support mechanism.
Yeah. I mean, I could ask the same of you as well. I mean, how long have you been leader?
Yes, I've been leader. It's 9 years coming up. I got elected to a council in 2004, so it's 21 years, not quite as long. You look better on it, shall we say that? I think, and so again, my passion was really social policy. I was a kid who grew up on the edge of care, and my mum died when I was 6. I had a dad who loved me and my sister, but it's not always easy. He had cancer, so we were, what would now be defined as carers. From being children, so we were, child carers, and I saw the best and the worst elements of the system, and that was in the 70s. So again, it was a very different time for councils, and particularly in the early 70s, it was it was a challenging national situation. Yeah. So you lived in an environment where all we knew was, we'd look at the budget, and I was always budgeting the household finances from being 7.
Wow.
I would be the one who would say, if we go to Quick Save, we can get margarine cheaper. My dad would be like, oh, what's she doing? Just let him get on with it. And then, so we learned to budget, and we learned to dig the garden because it gave us veg and all those sorts of things. So my involvement really is, so it's an absolute lived experience for people. And also, I think there's such a power of saying policy that delivers better outcomes for people, that is just genuinely a connection that you'll never get. And then, of course, there's an egomaniac in me who likes to walk down the street and have people say, you did a good job. Yeah. You got something good there, I mean, it makes up for times they say you were rubbish and you didn't get it right. But, there's a balance there to making that happen. But it is a bit like you. It's a complete passion to make that life journey for people better.
And your point there, I guess, is about really having that lived experience through the 70s to understand the importance of how policy shifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we've seen huge differences, haven't we? Yeah. Both in terms of the legal framework. We talked about 700 plus services that councils have to deliver now, and how we shape that for North Lincolnshire in terms of policy, but also in terms of our resources.
Oh yeah.
Because it is a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Because we don't have finite resources, and every single year we have to demonstrate and balance the books, don't they?
Yeah.
Which is different from different organisations, statutory organisations like the NHS.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the same legal requirements.
Got an overdraft.
Yeah, whereas councils don't.
No, they don't. And I think what's really interesting from my perspective in that is reconciling that the council not being in places where we don't need to be.
Totally.
So the intervention when I was young was the twag woman. We'd go and would knock on the door and then would want to know questions about the family if you were off. That was so. And to get to see a social worker, well, the social work system was very different.
Yeah.
50 years ago as it is now. It was a community-based, origins, and so now obviously we're talking about a media system that does expose every element of failure in the family, and particularly exposes the criminality that happens, which charges a whole level of system that vulnerability that we have to look and support families. And you'd call it, now we call it the prevent agenda, trying to stop families lapsing into that, the system of needing to remove children, whereas there was a culture that, the risk always was that social services would take your children away.
We'd be knocking on the door after the twag lady.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the next step. I remember my dad pleading with me with it wasn't a wall. It was, my dad had probably, when the council did the house up, we had 2 sills. They just the concrete sills, and it was where we used to sit in the garden. And I would always think that I thought I was part of the Grand National. I could jump over these. So every day I gathered a new bruise, and my dad would say, "What are you doing? You can't go to school with another bruise. What are they going to say?" So, so actually, the world has changed in that space. Thankfully, I think a lot for the better.
Yeah.
So. But just thinking about framing it into the council, I just take your point there around, there are lots of legal duties that council have. I sometimes think that's because government want to get rid of it. They put it to local government, and then they don't always give us the resource to manage it. That doesn't matter what government there is, it's just a fact. So we're the ones who always have to be creative and think about the things that we're doing. So I think a really good example is that we look really closely at the customer journey.
Yep.
So like co-locating libraries in leisure centres, well-being and all those sorts of things is something that lots of councils haven't even done. They've just closed libraries, but we've tried to collaborate. I think we do well here. We collaborate really well to make sure the customer, the resident, doesn't lose out, but we use our influence to...
And our resources.
Indeed.
Because I think there is something, isn't there? We need to... really be resourceful with the resources that we've got.
Yeah.
And that is the revenue budget, so the budget that we get every year to pay our nearly 3,000 staff.
Yeah.
To make sure that services keep running, be that your bins collected, your library door open, our culture and leisure offer.
Yeah.
We've talked about social work. So there's such diverse planning.
Yeah.
A council delivers such diverse services and such diverse opportunities for employment.
Yeah.
But there is also something about really understanding our assets.
Yeah.
Because assets, our capital, our assets across our community, our assets looking out of this window now in terms of what we've created as a centre for the town centre. All of that needs to be understood and used to its maximum impact.
Absolutely. Well, they're community assets.
They
that's
are.
The way. And I think as an organisation, we like to frame it in that way. These are community assets, and they need to be used to best effect.
And there is a challenge with that, though, isn't there? Because there is something about those assets, a bit like our houses and our homes, need maintenance.
Oh yeah.
They need looking after. There's certain requirements either through planning or regulation.
Yeah.
So those assets aren't something that's just built and left.
No.
Those assets for all of their life will require resourcing. Be that painting, be that special regulatory checks, a whole host of so actually those resources aren't just about shiny and new. They're about how we maintain our estate, how we continue to get the best use out of it for our residents, our families and our communities.
Light switch on. The light switch will be there. There'll be a stage. It's as you say, connecting people with those opportunities. Regenerating at the same time.
And there is something about our resources as a council in terms of our people.
Yes.
And I mentioned we've got nearly 3,000 staff. Most of those staff live in North Lincolnshire.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are connected to their communities. They contribute not just through their council employment, but as a resident.
Yeah.
So how do we start to think about connecting to our communities? Because if you said at the beginning, it's not always about us doing for, it's about how do we build, strengthen and celebrate those community assets to enable people to do for themselves. To understand their strengths and their assets, to be able to collectively and individually use those to their best advantage for themselves and for their communities. So our job is also about how we work alongside people to build those strengths. And that's where elected members are really important. Because you have the mandate.
Well, we see it every day. Well, not that staff are not. They have a different role in terms of supporting, that framework of things legally that the council's got to do, because we have to do that legally, because you see councils that don't follow. But a lot of this stuff is about the culture you have in the organisation. And I think you either are a collaborative, people taking on board, working together, and having values and beliefs that families are, actually best served by being together and looking after each other and supporting each other. Because some of our, best relationships, I think, are those that, are in that foster, special guardianship type sessions where families have broken down, and, we will all have a view on that. But the reality is, where you can extend for a child that relationship to give them some continuity of living in their community, which is the most of what we do, isn't it? Really, it is, significantly the least of our cost base goes on the place-based stuff. It goes on the things that impact on some of the most vulnerable people. Our great challenge in adult social care, as I see it, is, of course, people living longer with more complex conditions, but it's also those people who've got complex needs that are living in communities now, as they should be, and may need support, whether that's housing and all that sort of stuff. So that's a significant part of our spend, but it's invested in the people that people see every single day.
Totally. And I think the challenge for us as a council is about how do we support, as I said, the person that's born today and the person that passes away today, to lead a life with purpose, where they have a sense of belonging, where they are able to not just be supported either through paid support or communities, but they're able to contribute and feel that they've got a sense of value in the life they lead. And everybody has something to contribute. Absolutely everybody. So for us, I think as a council, it's working and making sure that we safeguard people and we keep them well, and we support them to be well. But it's also about ensuring that people have a quality of life. It's that thing, isn't it, that you might live till you're 93, but you've had 25 years of ill health and you've not been able to leave your house, then what sort of quality of life is that? So there is absolutely something about how we use our resources and our culture and our connectivity to our communities to really get a sense of how do we work with people to make sure that we really understand their ambitions. We understand that the young people that are born here and grow here want to stay here because we are a place of ambition and opportunity. So how we have those conversations about growth, about some of the challenges that we might have with British Steel, in some of those industrial, but how do we start to think about creating a future and That's very much your focus, because that leads us to people, doesn't it? Whether we're talking about regeneration, growth, it has to, you're really strong in that space. It always starts with people.
Because without people and having a real understanding about what connects them to their lives, and I think what a lot of people really struggle to understand, and I understand it because I sit and talk to people about this every day, is that the biggest determinant of our life is our family.
Yeah.
We were talking before I put my bag in the wrong space, and you said no. Bags and shoes going on, and it's that I did take my shoes off, everybody. But families are so powerful in the way that they disrupt our behaviour. They tell you don't drop litter. They get you to school on time. They get you to make sure you're clean. They get you to be ready for work. They get you to be,
ambitious.
Well, they often will give you a few quid to get you started in your own home. They'll give, they'll let you live with them if they can. They get you to live with them because you're their family, and you then become part of their care and support. It becomes this perfect circular environment, and all of those things for most people are served by a family. And a family is not mum and dad, because as I said, mine wasn't a mum and dad, it was a dad and a sister who she went on and had her own family. But my point there is actually the family is the cornerstone. So our job really, if you were to narrate it effectively, is to keep saying to our residents, your family are a significant part of what gives stability to you, and we have to be there for those people who don't have that family support mechanism to support them on there. And sometimes that's relationships, sometimes it's you've moved to a different place, sometimes it's the fact that your family that you were born into is not one you can live with.
Or they're passed away.
Oh, they've passed away, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about that, and then the impact. So that means then we get to concentrate our resources, which, as you say,
are not finite.
No, they're not. Absolutely. So how we use those resources then effectively to support those people that can't, whilst at the same time having to pick up for those people sometimes who, for whatever reason, fall out of that convention of what good community looks like, and we have to try and nudge their behaviours, and there's a sanction space in there too, whether that's picking up litter or
and social behaviour
or all the other bits. So I mean we're actually narrating now a community that becomes self-sustaining and needing less from the council if everybody starts to understand their place in that. And obviously at the same time you'd argue they don't need to pay as much council tax, which is so and this is not me trying to rebalance or reconnect, but actually it's true. If we have less waste, if we have more, if our community is more productive, more people in work, more people seeing an opportunity, and that's not everybody being a brain surgeon, that's everybody having purpose.
And it might, and I guess for some people it's not always work.
No.
And I think that's why I reference contribution to community, because it could be actually what they do is litter pick twice a week, or they do a knit and nutter, they do a knit and nutter, and what they're doing is they're knitting poppies. What we've got. So they're doing something which is meaningful and contributes. They're yarn bombing. But going back to your point, which I think is really an important point, that's why it is a relationship. It's an interaction with our communities, because we need to really target those resources to best effect, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
And we can't stretch them.
And when we can't stretch the money that families have got.
If everything becomes a priority, nothing is a priority. No. And then, so there absolutely is something about saying sometimes councils, with the resources they have to make difficult decisions. That some residents, might not like, because they're not getting the particular thing that they want for their community, or they're going to have to wait another year
for something to happen.
Something to happen, and I think that's sometimes the challenge to the sector is expectation.
It is. I mean, but I think, but what I'd argue there is that looking at you hear that a lot in the sector, but you don't hear it much in North Lincolnshire, because we're quite good at being incredibly agile, and we have a great team of people who understand that agility and the importance it has to the community. So, when we have our looked after children inspection, there is a trail of evidence right across the council that sees that those kids that can't live with the family for whatever reason, they have support from people right across. So the football match that happened a couple of days ago with our looked after children, with the people who work in our neighbourhood team, there's evidence of supporting the family business for those that can't live in that space, as much as there is evidence of the amazing work we do by supplying pickers and bags and all those things for those people who are out there volunteering all the time and saying, actually, I know it's not my litter, but somebody made a bad choice and they dropped it there. But I know that the council doesn't have finite resources, but I want the place to be really good, and I'm happy to.
Place.
Yeah, exactly.
It's my place.
And I'm happy to contribute towards making the place better, and I want to use it effectively, my time and my resource, and I'm happy to give a bit back. Why wouldn't I be happy to do that? But there's also that sanction space that we often find ourselves in, where there is a perception we do it in a sort of draconian way because we're just collector of taxes, and I sit and count in a counting house, but actually that is part of what we want from a good and a bad community. So if somebody does fly tip all the things because they can't be bothered to take it to the tip, there has to be a sanction in that space. Why should people who work hard all their lives, who contribute to the well-being of the community, pay for a system that rewards people's bad behaviours? This is not life choices around other things, because I absolutely fundamentally believe that there are points in everybody's life. They say you're only 2 steps away from being homeless.
Or vulnerable. Being in a situation where you feel a level of vulnerability. Going back to your point around families, children, there is also something for us around how we have to prioritise our services and our resources to those children who are being looked after by us. Who for whatever reason we become the parents for those children and young people. And sometimes, again, that can be from the day they're born to the day they transition into adulthood and beyond. So actually, we absolutely need to prioritise our resources like we do as parents, if we are parents. You described your experience of being of being a child, and your family having to make really difficult choices around money and how it was spent, and I guess we our resources have to be prioritised for those young people who we absolutely, in our care, like our own children, we want to flourish, we want them to grow, we want them to have positive experiences of the world, to go on to be to fulfil their ambition. And so I think from a sector perspective, and that's sometimes something that's not often seen, how we support those hundreds of young people to have a family that is we are their family. Where they feel cared for, they feel concerned about, they have the nurture and the care and the love to help them succeed in life. That's one of our most important jobs.
It's critical, and I look at, and I know you and I both nearly shed a tear every time we look at how resilient those young people have to be. If you can imagine people watching this thinking that actually I can't live with my parents for whatever reason, there's no judgment about that. There is just, for whatever circumstances, you have to live now with somebody else. And so there's 2 elements to that. First of all is, where possible, we try to keep people in their local, young people in their area, with their family connections, because it's critical. It's not just about people saying, oh, now I've got to look after somebody else's children. No, actually, that's a critical part of keeping them a stable life. And children's life is so precious. You look at a young person and you think, the world of opportunity is at their door, but they need people to have, their back. They need that support. And as you say, that's a significant part of the industry, I use that word, that we're in. That's a significant part of how we care and support people. But then there's also an older population who get, post 18, who are living with more complex needs. Neurodiversity is on the rise, challenges in mental health is on the rise. This is
issues around unemployment.
Indeed, absolutely furthest away from that labour market.
And that is sometimes the challenge of our sector, or of the council. But it's also the thing that is richly rewarding from a policy perspective.
Of course it is.
To really understand your communities, to really get a sense of the strengths, where we need to really build and focus on, and that might be employment in certain areas, it might be health issues, it might be a whole range of issues. But what's really important for us as a council is to understand our communities, be connected to them, and understand how we can deploy the resources that we have to best effect. And they will be different in different areas.
Of course they will. But I think that's the exciting thing about my passion for social policy. So if I look at that early child relationship, we have the Imagination Library, which we fund, which is that book scheme 0 to 5, where no matter what your financial background is, you get to share that time with a book. And I often get people say, well, we didn't claim it because, actually we had one anyway, which I think is great. That's a good use of sustainable resources in your family. But also, what is my passion around that is that child, those children, irrespective of what their family circumstances, rich or poor, educated or not as educated, they get to start their school journey with a common thread of having some support from the council. And the evidence then is, of course, they read better. They then start to connect with lives. Our summer reading scheme was phenomenal. Another great policy where people get to go and do that. And then it starts to embed itself into the free swimming that we do at Easter and summer. So we get physical activity as well as mental agility. So we start to build resilient young people in families, whether their own or not, that start to thrive. And then again, in later life, we do exactly the same for people, whatever their challenge and we want them to stay fit and agile and healthy. So whether it's a suite of opportunities for people to volunteer, or frankly, it's the over 66 policy, that's the leisure and activities, all those other things, and the fact that we've protected libraries here because we see that as a really important part of our intervention to support people to have a better life. That's the exciting thing about reframing the policy, because I think, and we often have this discussion, I can't bear deficit. I hate this narrative that is all the things that you can't do, which often councils do. I think as a sector, they're a moany bunch sometimes. They get into this, these are the things we can't do. And somewhere, as we often have the discussion, but how productive was it? What did it do that made the difference? And are you permanently checking that? Because if it's only about the money you put in, it would be a bit glib, wouldn't it? To say to you, if I sat here as a person and said to you, I just bought a coat and it cost me £200, you think, what is he on about? Let me know how warm it is. Let me know how
stylish it is.
Oh God,
how many compliments you get.
Better still, I don't get wet when I'm outside.
How functional it is.
So it can't just be about the money. It's got to be about that qualitative stuff, the things that make a difference. And so quite often we will right-size the way that we invest to say, actually, we did that, but it wasn't as good. And it's a conversation I have with you all the time, and the team here who help us lead the council, is say, sometimes things work for them. Sometimes you put them in and you think, and actually they don't work, so I have to change it.
And that's all right.
It is.
Because that's how you get to the right place.
Yes. Well, it is.
And the sector has changed considerably. We started off talking about 1970.
Yeah.
And sometimes and we reference our outstanding children's services, for example. The reason why they're outstanding is they're not static.
No.
They understand and they change.
Yeah.
They try things, and sometimes trying things is about change. It's about accepting that things are different, and you can't be doing the same thing all the time.
No.
Because you do need different outcomes, because your communities change and people change. So actually, being a council that is a council of learning, of saying, actually, what's really important is that we learn and grow. And the way that we learn and grow is by making mistakes. Well, as an adult, the things that I've learned most in my life have been through the mistakes. And at the time, they can seem, but actually, as you mature and grow, they come a part of your learning and the choices you make. And as a council, I think that's a fundamental part of our culture, is accepting that sometimes things don't always go according to plan, but we still can learn from that.
Well, and that's just like our own personal journey in life.
Yeah.
When it was getting your children to tie their shoes, whether it's about getting them to eat their lunch and not bring it home and just eat the crisps, they're all things that we all have to, and we learn. I won't give you them again. I won't do that again. I won't, and we all learn from that, and we have to learn from that as councils, because we are just extensions of people. We are all people making decisions with the best information we've got in front of us, and trying to, to support a better life for people that live in the area. It feels like a good time to start some up. It feels like it's been a pleasure. I mean, we work together all the time. Alison was absolutely a choice for this organisation, because you were a perfect fit. She's going to go a bit like, oh my God, now, perfect fit. And the relationship we have is very driven, because I think our values are very closely linked. They were really, because it is about using the organisation to give purpose to people. So it's a pleasure, and you're going to see us. You don't usually. Alison's usually the other side of the camera. I am. So this is a bit different, but we're both really passionate about making sure that people understand, not in a patronising way, what happens in councils, but also we champion North Lincolnshire.
We do,
and we want this to be people understanding what it's like to see what an outstanding council looks like, one that is really agile, that does really well, that champions people, and is really, but it's really genuinely buoyed up by the fact we have a good team of people who work to make life better for people every single day. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.